Welcome to Decluttering 55 Plus with Michelle Passoff. This is the place to come for news you can use to get things done. Everybody knows that too much stuff is clutter, and cleaning it makes you neater and tidier. To us, it is a life management tool that helps you navigate your next steps. This is what my book, Lighten Up, Free Yourself from Clutter, is all about. As baby boomers, we have a lot in front of us that is confounding and confronting, so we sweep things under the carpet and put them off another day or forever. That is clutter because it keeps us stuck, and my new book addresses all of that. So we're going to bring experts, authors, and authorities here to talk with us about health, relationships, technology, finance, housing. What are you going to do next in life? Passing down your life stories, and even the challenges of making final arrangements. Here we aim to learn, open new possibilities, choose, take action, and create a legacy, not a mess. So let's get started. Today we're going to talk about stuff, not just any stuff, stuff that may have value. So in order to learn more and avoid costly mistakes, we called in the services of George Higby to pick his brain today. I know George for years and years because I used to have an estate sale company, and George was an appraiser that we oftentimes called upon to get the value of the items in our sales. And he always came like an encyclopedia of knowledge in order to determine the prices of things. George, you might know him yourself from the YouTube channel on a show called The Antique Nomad. He's an appraiser, officially certified by the Certified Appraisers Guild of America. And he's going to tell us what's new, what's happening in the world of antiques, so that when you go to sell them, you know a little bit more about being an educated seller as well as an educated buyer. So welcome, George. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much.
So tell us what the Antique Nomad does. What is that?
Well, it's become my moniker because of my YouTube channel, but it reflects the fact that for over 20 some years now, I have been traveling coast to coast, and I conduct estate sales, I do appraisals, I attend and sell at antique shows, and I have spaces in various malls and galleries. And so I just do all sorts of anything that relates to the world of antiques and vintage. And I really enjoy it and love it a lot. I've been in the business for over 30 years, which is hard to believe, but time marches on. And
tell us.
It's just endlessly fascinating. And I can't imagine what else I would be doing.
Which came first, the appraiser or the explorer traveling around?
Oh, well, I think the explorer was deep in my psyche because my father had been in the military. We got moved around a lot, and then he got a job and was training, and we got moved around a lot. So as a kid, we traveled all over the country, and a lot of times it was from station to station, and we didn't really get to stop and see a lot of things. So as an adult, I had wanderlust, and I went back to see all the things that we had to drive by in a hurry when I was a kid.
Yeah. And when you go, so first of all, tell us the difference between, like when you hire an estate sale company, they're not necessarily appraisers. And when you hire an appraiser, they're not necessarily an estate sale company. Now, you happen to be both. And from what I understand, it's two different hats. When you're appraising, you're not a seller. And when you're a seller, you're not an appraiser. Can you speak to the differences between appraising and doing an estate sale and when you should use and hire?
Oh, it's a long question with a fairly short answer, surprisingly. When you're hiring an estate sale company, it means that you have already kind of gone through and made peace with what you're letting go. And that means that at that point, you're wanting a professional whose job it is to be able to bring people, if you're having it on site, to the site and sell the items, or if they're dealing with it online, that they have the expertise and the crew and a place to take things so that they can deal with that for you. If you're hiring an appraiser, it's because you're looking for values on items. And oftentimes estate sale companies, if they don't have an appraiser on staff, will have to hire somebody to do those sorts of things for the kinds of items that sometimes come up in houses that maybe you've never seen before. Whereas an appraiser may go in for other purposes besides estate purposes. It might be for insurance, or it might be for settling an estate rather than selling the contents of an estate. So those are the two differences. They are two professions that work side by side, and one person can do both, and that can be beneficial. But an appraiser is someone there to create a valuation, not to buy and sell the merchandise.
When you get certified as an appraiser, what are the particular qualities or education or assets that you have to have in order to be dubbed an anointed an appraiser?
Well, the most important thing is that you have to learn and abide by USPAP, which are Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. And I certify in every written appraisal I do that I am holding to those standards, including things like I don't have a personal interest in the outcome of the appraisal. In other words, I'm not a joint owner of this thing trying to push a value so that we get a higher amount, for example. That's one of the things that you have to certify in every appraisal. So it's really about standards and practices and knowing how to write the reports correctly. The IRS has a very clear definition of fair market value you must use if you're doing an appraisal for the IRS. Say somebody is moving and they've decided to donate something rather than sell it at an estate sale. If it's over $500, you have to have a form signed by a professional appraisal saying that they've evaluated those items. And so those are the sorts of things that you learn in appraisal school. They don't generally teach you about the merchandise. You can go to other training, or they may have follow-up courses and events where you get together and you learn about merchandise. But they expect you, I originally accredited through an organization that expected you to have at least 3 years in the antique and vintage business before you ever set foot in their school.
So if you went to hire an appraiser, if they have a certificate, that's one thing, but how do you assess whether or not the depth of their knowledge is adequate to correctly price an item?
I think you need to take them through and show them what you have and get some opinions about it. And if you are not knowledgeable yourself about it, pick a few things and do a little bit of research ahead yourself. You can go to eBay completed sales. You can go to websites and see where people are, do a Google search, find items that are for sale, get an idea of the price range on those that are similar to what you have. And then when the appraiser comes in, generally a certified appraiser will have their professional profile that'll show what they do and their training so that you'll have an idea. But you can also ask a few questions. Well, what do you think of this? And what do you think this is? And tell me about it. And you'll get a feel pretty quickly for the depth of their knowledge just by asking a few questions like that.
Should you interview more than one appraiser before selecting one, or?
Well, I would say call references. Talk to references and see if they seem like they know their stuff. Look at their professional profile. Maybe check into their background a little bit. And the most important situation with the appraisal is make sure that they are arm's length. If they are there to do an appraisal, don't also then let them turn around and buy the merchandise from you, because it creates a conflict of interest. And how do you know that what they're telling you is legitimate if they're doing both things at the same time? I think that's the biggest thing to watch out for.
Now, you travel around the country, and I was wondering what's the difference is there any difference like in the Northeast from the Northwest, or the Southwest from the Southeast? As you travel around the country, are you going to find different kinds of items, and are the prices different from place to place?
Absolutely. And that's part of the reason I do it, is because I can take things from one part of the country and sell them in another. For example, if I'm in an estate sale in Seattle and I see crockery or cast iron cookware and the price is right, I buy it and I take it to Kentucky, where I have an antique mall space, and I sell it there, because those things sell for more in Kentucky than they sell for out on the coast. If I'm in Kentucky, which I was a few weeks ago, and I found a plastic Italian little stool about this big for $20. And I bought that, and it is with me here in Seattle, and I'm going to put it out for $120 today, because modernist furnishings like that sell way better on the coast. So it really does depend. There's also a lot of regional variation. where things were made initially, there may be more of them and more collectors of them in the area they came from. In this era of everything coming from Walmart or a big box store and everything is shipped over and it all looks the same, we just sort of assume everybody has the same stuff everywhere. But that is not how it was 50 years ago. You would have a company that made pottery and most of their accounts were in the area where they were producing it. So, for example, in California, you might have people really interested in treasure craft and pottery, craft pottery or Bauer pottery, but you go to Minnesota and they all want Red Wing because that's where that was made. So there are definitely still regional differences in what you'll find and what the prices are depending on where the collectors and the collector interest is.
Then is it smarter for you if you have high value things or collectible things to sell it in an estate sale in your area, or should you put it online so that people in other areas can have access to purchase it at a higher price?
I think it depends on your timing and your situation and how much stuff you have. If you have a few pieces that are of high value and they seem like they're doing better outside your area, then by all means, if you have the time and the inclination, put them online and sell them that way. On the other hand, if you have like grandma had 1,000 pieces of Fenton glass, and yes, we could sell that online. If we took the next 8 months, we might be able to sell that. Do you have 8 months? Is that what you want to do for 8 months? And if the answer is no, then put it in an estate sale. Let it go. Understand that estate sales are selling online as well. So they're going to pick some of the plums if they think they can get more money. But the estate sale companies oftentimes also have other resources. They may have private clients who will pay more than you would get for the item. So talk to them about that and then make your decisions. The estate sale company wants to know what they're going to be allowed to sell before they sign the contract. So you don't have a long time to decide, but you certainly can talk to them about a few of your more expensive items and say, how would you sell this? And if the answer comes back and you like the answer, let them do it and take you out of having to do the work. If you're not so sure about the answer, well, then maybe you do a few pieces yourself.
I know we used to have an estate sale company for 14 years in Tampa, Florida. And one time there was all this mid-century modern furniture in the house, and it just doesn't sell that well in Florida, whereas in New York and Chicago it does. And we had a private buyer in those cities, and just before the estate sale even came to look at what they were going to be selling, we plucked it out. And it's not the estate sale. I mean, we were going to auction stuff. Before we had the auction company come and take a look at what there was to auction, we plucked the stuff we knew that could sell in a different city for more money out and sold it elsewhere for 4 or 5 times the price that we would ever get down.
I had a set of silver at a sale in Florida, and it was a designer in Chicago who's really well known in Chicago and sells for big money there. And nobody outside of Chicago collects this stuff. And the family had moved to Florida from Chicago. So the heirs knew that this set had come from this particular designer. And we sent it to an auction house in Chicago and they got $11,000 for it. If we put it in the estate sale, we would have probably sold it for the silver value, which was about $2,000. So yes,
that's a big difference.
And that's the sort of thing, that's part of the reason I do the traveling I do, is because I get to see a lot of different markets and what works and what sells and what doesn't. And so it gives me a rather unique perspective. Most people are not as mobile as I am. And so they don't necessarily have that view of the market. And I think it's something that sets me apart. And it's part of why I like doing it.
What is trending these days? I love to know what's in, what's out, what's, I know we used to have like curios full of Hummels and nobody wanted Hummels anymore. People collected them thinking that they were going to retire on their Hummels. Well, that wasn't the case. So it hasn't come back into fashion. And what is in fashion?
Well, that's an interesting point that you bring up Hummels, because Hummels have definitely dropped considerably in value, although a few of them are still selling for big numbers. And in general, they are starting to sell, but they're starting to sell for $20 and $24 and prices like that, where they used to sell for $50 and $60 for the same item. And what I tell people is, remember that your collecting was for your joy and the experience of doing it, and you got your use out of it. People ask me what I value the things in my own home, and I say 0, and they laugh and they say, "No, you're an appraiser. How much is your stuff worth?" And I say, "No, I literally value it at 0. And I have a list of it for insurance. If something ever happened to it, of course, then we would value it at what it was worth." But I look at it as I bought it for me to enjoy. When I'm done with it, 5 years, 20 years, whenever, if I get what I paid for it, that's great. If it's gone up, wonderful. If it's gone down, you know what? I paid to enjoy it. Do you buy something at Target and take it home and then say, someday this is going to be worth $30 and I only paid $5 today? No, you bought it because you bought it to use. So think of your collections as your enjoyment. You're willing to pay the price to enjoy it today at whatever the prevailing price is. Don't get hung up on what it used to sell for or what it might sell for, because it's all relative to a certain moment in time. When I started in the business, we sold tons of Victorian furniture. Now it's very hard to place, especially in the Sun Belt, because there's not many Victorian houses for it to go in. On the other hand, the mid-century modern that you talked about, which I remember when you first started selling in Florida, it really wasn't that hot and that active there. Well, now I could sell every piece of mid-century designer furniture I could get my hands on in Florida.
Whoa, okay.
Because the market
it changes. It actually changes fast then, because
it wasn't that long
trends
ago.
can move quickly. So you're making a good point, and that is whether your stuff has value or doesn't value. Getting stuck on stuff is really going down the road to hell, so to speak. So don't get would your advice to people be don't get stuck on your stuff?
I think my advice to people is to have some perspective. If the stuff is still meaningful for you and it gives you joy and you enjoy it when you look at it, then hey, that's great. Maybe you should hang on to that piece and take that with you when you're moving on to another place. On the other hand, if you're going to have an estate sale and you have a box of things in the attic that you haven't taken out in 20 years, but it was grandma's, so we're holding it and it's so special that we never look at it and we never do anything with it and we never enjoy it and it's not part of our lives, but by golly, we have it in the attic and that makes us feel good. You might want to examine that again, because that might be the thing to let go in the estate sale. And don't worry about the fact that Aunt Joan said that Uncle Roger said this was worth a lot of money, because that was years ago. And those stories, they may hold up and they may not. So again, I would say don't get hung up on it. Look in terms of your life. One of the best things my mother ever said to me, we had this huge piece of furniture. It was beautiful. And I dragged it all the way cross country to Florida. And it literally would not go up the staircase in the apartment that I bought. And I said,
that's another lesson, is measure before you drag it cross country, measure where you're going before you decide what you're taking with you.
Exactly. And I said, Mom, I don't know what to do. And she had a great story about how they got it. And it was 100 years old and it was very meaningful, which is why she wanted me to have it. And I said, I don't know what to do. Would you like to have it back? And she said, son, if I give you something, it's a gift and you can do with it as you want. My mother was always telling me I had to hold on to all the family stuff forever because that's what she did. And I realized after she was gone, she didn't use it. It kept her from doing the things she wanted to do. She was always afraid to travel or leave the house because, the precious things, something might happen to them. So she was stuck because of her stuff. She was trapped by it. And my mom said, why don't you just put it out to sell and someone else can enjoy it? And it ended up selling and going to a marina in St. Petersburg in their office. And they said, you can come look at it anytime you want. And people get to enjoy this wonderful piece of furniture all the time. And I didn't have to keep it for that to happen. And that was a big lesson for me.
Yeah, sentimentality can keep you stuck. The price of things can keep you stuck. And maybe you just need a change of mind and a change of heart, and think that maybe what you're selling is going to be loved for another generation with somebody else, but you're free. You can get free from it. So people are either sentimental or they're stuck on price, but either way, you have to reconcile that at some point. And an appraiser can help you at least get your hands on whether or not you're stuck on something that's valuable or something that's just sentimental. But either way, you got to get unstuck.
Yes, I think that's the biggest problem. And also what is sticking you? I had a client who called and said, "Well, I guess I need an estate sale because my kids really want me to get rid of this stuff." And I said, "Okay." And we looked around and it was an ordinary house with regular things. And I said, "Well, where are you going to go?" And she said, "Well, I'm thinking of moving in with my oldest daughter. I know I don't need the kitchen stuff and I don't need this, but they want me to get rid of all the heirlooms and the things that are important to me." And I said, "Well, how do you feel about that?" And she said, "Those are the things I want to keep." And I said, "Well, why don't you get to make that decision?" And it turned out the clutter she was facing was mostly the 3 bedrooms full of her kids' stuff that they never came back and got when they grew up. And all of the stuff that they had bought for the family to use over the years that was still sitting in drawers in the garage and all those things. But they wanted her to get rid of the antique and the old stuff because that was the stuff that they didn't want to have. And I said, "Why don't you look at your kids and say, if you want this to happen, you come over and deal with your old stuff and help me. And then we can talk about the other thing." And gee, suddenly the kids weren't very interested in all about her getting rid of this stuff because they were going to have to do some work. And it turned out the kids and what they were chirping in her ears, that was the clutter in her taste. So I thought
what I hear in what you're saying is also that if she has to change her mind because she's moving into maybe 1 bedroom in a child's house, and you can't take your entire heritage with you into a 1 bedroom. You have to assess where you're headed in order to know what to bring with you. Headed.
But the thing is, when I looked, the amount of stuff she wanted to keep, she probably needed to lose a few pieces of furniture. But most of it really was not that much and not that consequential. But the kids were really, the stuff she wanted to let go to allow her to do this were the things the kids weren't making decisions on. And yet the kids were pushing her to get rid of her stuff, but they didn't want her to get rid of
so maybe the moral of that story is that the family has to have a little bit of a family powwow or conference and keep the peace by all chipping in together to help.
All have to make this decision. It's not just on the parents, especially if you have someone who is suddenly taken ill. The idea of like, "Oh, I've had a health problem and now I have to move in with family, but my family is going to make me deal with this and I don't feel good and I don't have the energy." So yes, I think having a little bigger picture and realizing that it took a village to fill that house, it might take a village to unfill it.
So the moral of the story is exactly don't maybe if you're listening out there and you're not the 55 plus crowd, but you're the child of a 55 pluser, that maybe you can have a heart and lend a hand. That's all we're going to have time to talk about today, but it's good to end on that note, is love one another in making those decisions and letting go. So we're going to wrap up right now, and I want to thank you again, George, for coming by and giving us all your wealth of knowledge and taking a moment from crisscrossing the country to collect things, sell things, and appraise things. I appreciate it very much. No doubt people will learn more if they stop in at your YouTube channel called The Antique Nomad when they get a moment, so that they can keep getting share in all of your travels back and forth across the U.S.
I go lots of places and I talk about what I see and what it is and what has value and what people are collecting today. So, and it's free. So lots of information that you can get just by watching.
Okay, folks. So we're going to wrap things up today. I think we've learned a lot from you, George. There's so much more to know, but we have to start somewhere. So the next stop might be to visit you on your YouTube channel. It's called The Antique Nomad. And are you there weekly, or how often are you on, George?
Every Monday and Wednesday, I put out new content and some other bonus content as well. And I always talk about what I see, whether I'm in an antique store or conducting an estate sale. I try to talk about what I see, what I think people like, what maybe isn't as popular as it used to be, and give people an idea of what they're looking at so they can look at their own collections and their own home with a little bit more knowledge.
And George can help you know the value of what it's time to let go of. So In the meantime, please pay a visit to our website at www.decluttering55plus.com and click on the Let's Connect button to share your comments and questions, as well as tell us your experiences with letting go of clutter in your life. Tell your family and friends to pay a visit to our podcast. Let's grow this community. Again, thank you for stopping in, and be sure to have a clutter-free day. Thanks. Well, that's all we have time for today. So let's wrap things up with a request that you go to our website, www.decluttering55plus.com, and click on the Let's Connect button. Share your thoughts, insights, and tell us the lessons you've learned. If you're facing challenges or celebrating triumphs on your decluttering journey, we want to hear from you. Connect with us on social media. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to us on YouTube. Let us know you're part of our community by rating and reviewing us from wherever you're listening from today. And don't forget, invite your friends and family, young and old, to tune in too. Let's include them in the conversation. The more, the merrier. Thanks for being with us today. And until next time, this is Decluttering 55 Plus with Michelle Passoff, wishing you a clutter-free day.